Hundreds of migrants moved from a camp in Belarus to one of the checkpoints into Poland, causing a tense standoff with border guards there. As the crisis escalates, EU foreign ministers have been planning more sanctions against Belarus. Donald Trump's former advisor, Steve Bannon, has handed himself in to the FBI in Washington. He's scheduled to appear in court to face charges for refusing to cooperate with an investigation into the January 6 attack on the US Capitol. The authorities in the Indian capital, Delhi, say that they are ready to impose a complete lockdown to fight worsening air pollution. The Supreme Court had requested Delhi bring in measures to control emissions. And British counter-terrorism police say an explosion that destroyed a taxi in Liverpool on Sunday appears to have been caused by a homemade bomb.
A Hong Kong government official expresses sympathy over the death of an innocent citizen during a riot earlier this week. St. Mark's Square in Venice closes because of the worst flooding in the area in 50 years. Reports say 70% of Venice has been flooded. Heavy snowfall in southeastern France has left at least one person dead and cut power to around 300,000 homes. And Sri Lankan officials make final preparations for the country's presidential election on Saturday. A record 35 candidates are seeking the top office.
An American journalist who was sentenced to 11 years in prison in Myanmar for allegedly spreading false information has been freed and is on his way home. Danny Fenster is the managing editor of online English language magazine Frontier Myanmar. On Friday, the 37-year-old was found guilty of several charges, including incitement and unlawful association with an illegal group. He was detained at Yangon International Airport in May on his way to the United States to visit family. The Associated Press reported former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Bill Richardson said in a statement, Fenster had been handed over to him on Monday in Myanmar and would return to the U.S. via Qatar over the next day and a half. Frontier Myanmar issued a statement expressing gratitude to people who worked for Fenster's release. It also called on Myanmar's military to release all other journalists who've been unjustly arrested and remain behind bars in the country. Now to the coronavirus situation here in Japan, where the number of new infections remains low, with Tokyo reporting the fewest cases this year. Officials in the capital confirmed 7 new infections on Monday. The daily figure has been under 50 for the past 30 days. Across Japan, authorities reported 79 new cases and 1 death. The government is preparing to start rolling out a 3rd round of vaccine doses next month. The health ministry initially set the interval between the 2nd and 3rd shots at about 8 months or more. But the ministry has decided to allow local governments to administer booster shots after an interval of 6 months. Data from other countries suggest the effect of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine to prevent infection dropped by half within 6 months after the 2nd jab.
I want to get a jab early.
If it's ready, I want to get a shot as soon as possible to stay safe.
People who received the Moderna or AstraZeneca vaccines can also get the Pfizer booster shot. The health ministry has yet to decide whether to allow children between 5 and 11 to be vaccinated. Kita Ward in Tokyo is providing special support for foreign residents who could miss out on being vaccinated due to language barriers. Officials set up a venue where people can get inoculated without reservations. Volunteers help them fill in forms and translate explanations by doctors in 6 languages, including Chinese, Vietnamese, and Bengali. 3 months have passed since the Taliban retook control of Afghanistan on August 15th. As the country suffers worsening food shortages, the Taliban's interim government has begun offering people wheat in exchange for their labor. Last month, the Taliban launched a Food for Work program, paying workers with wheat instead of cash. About 2,000 citizens dug with shovels and picks at construction sites in Kabul. The Taliban say they're releasing 66,000 tons of flour from their stock and distributing 10 kilograms per person in exchange for a day's work.
My family, including my children, would starve if I didn't do this job. What else can I do?
Afghanistan is experiencing economic decline and a humanitarian crisis as its overseas assets remain frozen. The Taliban interim government has still not been recognized by the international community. Countries, including the United States, are calling on the group to form an inclusive government with all Afghan forces. Last week, the Taliban's acting foreign minister requested emergency assistance from the international community.
Humanitarian aid should be considered separately from political issues, but the international community is linking them.
Meanwhile, the UN World Food Program has begun giving people cash as well as food. On Sunday, about 1,200 people lined up to receive about $38 per family. The WFP says close to 23 million people, or over half the country's population, face acute food insecurity. U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping will soon hold their first summit talks online. At issue will be whether the leaders can develop mutual trust despite rising tensions by maintaining a dialogue. A U.S. official explained Biden's three main objectives for the talks. The president wants to make clear Washington's wish to build common-sense guardrails to avoid miscalculations or misunderstandings and ensure competition does not lead to conflict. Biden will discuss areas of divergence between their nations. He'll express concerns about unfair economic behavior, including China's support of industry and its practice of economic coercion. Biden will also question China's human rights practices and what's seen as its coercive and provocative behavior with respect to Taiwan. And the president will express his willingness to work together on transnational issues, including climate change, where the interests of the U.S. and China align. A Chinese foreign ministry spokesperson told reporters about the meeting.
The relations between China and the United States are at a critical point. The online meeting is a major event, not only for China-U.S. relations, but also for international relations.
A senior official in the Biden administration said against the backdrop of Xi's continued centralization of power, leader-level engagement is crucial to responsibly manage the competition between the two powers. Floating pumice stones have washed ashore on a beach near Tokyo. Officials are investigating whether they're from an undersea volcano that erupted in the Pacific. A small number of pumice stones were found in Tateyama City, Chiba Prefecture. There have been no reports of damage to local ship navigation or fishing activities. Pumice stones have also been found on Tokyo's southern islands. Now, since mid-October, such stones have been appearing around the southwestern islands of Okinawa and Amami, affecting ferry services, fishing operations, and tourism. The stones could be from an undersea volcano about 1,000 kilometers south of Japan's main island that erupted in August. Japan says it'll do what it can to cut back on coal power. Eliminating fossil fuels was a major focus of UN climate talks, which wrapped up on Saturday. World leaders committed to limiting the increase in global temperatures to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Recent data suggests Japan relies on coal for about 30% of its power. But the chief cabinet secretary says Japan will work hard to achieve carbon neutrality by the year 2050.
It is important right now for Japan to use a range of energy sources. We need to secure electricity in a stable way while reducing how much comes from coal power generation because it emits large amounts of carbon.
Matsuno also says Japan will promote new fuel sources, including hydrogen and ammonia. Switching gears now to sports, a packed media conference here in Tokyo has greeted Japanese baseball sensation Ohtani Shohei after his breakout season in the U.S. major leagues. Ohtani's stellar year stunned the sports world and launched his career into the stratosphere. But as we'll see in our next report, it came on the heels of a difficult start.
Ohtani Shohei is back in Japan for the first time since gaining superstar status overseas. Now, sports fans are waiting to see if he'll collect baseball's biggest honor.
I'm happy to be graded on the numbers I put up this year, but the awards aren't really on my mind. They aren't something I am focused on.
This was a historic year for the first two-way star in generations. As a hitter, the Los Angeles Angels racked up 46 homers with 100 runs batted in and 26 stolen bases. As a pitcher, he won 9 games. He also became the first player in history to start an All-Star game on the mound and at the plate. But Ohtani says his success was bittersweet. His team didn't perform well and didn't make the playoffs.
なかなかこう、なんていうのかな、チームの勝ちもついてこないですし。
At the end of this year, it was difficult for the team to win, and there was no prospect of making the postseason. For me, there were many mentally tough scenes in the second half. Of course, I sometimes felt depressed, thinking that I couldn't hit as a batter and gave up hits as a pitcher. But if I look on the bright side, I can only experience that feeling if I'm able to play in games.
まあ、良かった悪かったっていう結果が必ず出てくるので。
Injuries were a huge problem in Ohtani's first 3 years in the U.S. After his rookie year, he needed surgery on his elbow. The next year, he went under the knife for an injury on his knee. Before the start of this season, some baseball pundits were calling it his last chance to be a two-way player.
怪我はやっぱりしてたので。
There were times when it was mentally tough, but I thought I would be able to pitch someday. The doctor who performed my surgery as well as the trainer who supported me believed I could. I was worried because I thought I would definitely get better, but I didn't feel impatient.
思ってやってきたので、まあ不安はありましたけど、焦りはなかったですかね。
After this breakout season, Ohtani was showered with honors. He won a Historic Achievement Award and a Silver Slugger. But his goal for next year is a modest one.
どれぐらい試合に出れるか。
My biggest goal is to see how many games I can play, how many times I can stand in the batter's box, and whether I can take the mound many times. After the season ends, I can look back on whether it was good or bad. I think the most important thing is to continue playing for the entire season.
出続けることが一番かなと思ってます。
This week, Major League Baseball will hand out its biggest awards. Ohtani is a finalist for American League MVP. The winner will be announced on Thursday.
Next in weather, people in northeastern parts of the United States have been dealing with the aftermath of some tornadoes over the weekend. Our meteorologist Jonathan O has more for there and elsewhere in our World Weather Report.
Hello, the northeastern United States has been battered with some strong storms that went through the weekend, and we had this low that's now traveling up toward the north and east, and it actually caused some damage. Take a look at this video coming out of New York State, where the storm with gusts of more than 120 kilometers per hour, 120 kilometers per hour hit parts of the northeastern U.S. Saturday. The strong winds toppled down trees and power lines in New York, with one home being cut in half by a large tree. Over in Connecticut, 2 tornadoes were reported, and that left over 9,000 people without power, along with those damage that you can see right there on top of the cars as well. We are seeing the low-pressure system that's impacting the region moving toward the north and east, and behind it, chilly weather. A lot more in terms of cold air coming down over the Great Lakes and then moving toward the east. So we may be talking about some snow as we go through the day on Monday. Then we go to Tuesday. We're talking about single-digit highs when it comes to the Celsius scale, so be on the lookout for that. On the flip side, over the Pacific Northwest, once again, another system rolling through with rain and even some snow into the higher elevations with that strong onshore flow coming on for places like Washington State and also into Oregon. And be on the lookout for the possibility of landslides, especially for those of you in Washington State, as you've had a lot of rain. Chilly air behind that front, 7 for the high in Vancouver on Tuesday, 8 in Seattle. Notice also from Toronto into New York, staying below that 10-degree mark coming up on Tuesday. Meanwhile, across Japan, along the Pacific side, things are a little bit on the calmer side, but toward the north, we're talking about some snow possibilities and still some instability in the forecast. Not a huge situation, but at least something to be on the lookout for as we head toward Tuesday. Looking at temperatures to still be on the mild side in places like Tokyo and also back toward the west. High of around 19 in Tokyo, also to Osaka. 20 degrees in Fukuoka, with showers in Niigata with a high of 15 on Tuesday. Hope you have a good day wherever you are.